You're about to watch a great interview on TYT Interviews. If you want to watch them live, members are the only ones who get to do that. tytnetwork.com/join. Become a member. Enjoy the interviews as they happen.
Hey TYT, I'm Nomi Konst. In our interview series, we have been interviewing quite a few people who've come out with new books lately, and you may recognize our next guest from being an anchor on Univision for the very notable and newsworthy debate interaction he had with Donald Trump when he was candidate during the presidential primary, when Donald Trump essentially had his folks kick him out of a press conference. Of course, it's Jorge Ramos, the anchor at Univision. He has won 8 Grammys. He is the author of the new book, Stranger, The Challenge of a Latino Immigrant in the Trump Era. It is also out in Spanish for those who want to brush up on their Spanish. I should have gotten that copy.
All right.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ramos, for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thank you.
You have written several books as well and have been covering, U.S. politics and global politics for decades at this point. What was so surprising about this interaction with Donald Trump, given that you've seen everything, especially in Latin America, where things can be a little bit more feisty?
Exactly. Well, I come from the universe of fake news. I come from Mexico. I cover Latin America for decades. And remember, in my country, for 71 years, from 1929 to the year 2000, there was no democracy. So the governments were so used to news all the time, and the citizens, we were used to fake news. So then I came to the United States 35 years ago, and I never thought it was going to be the same. And suddenly, what was so different about Donald Trump were, for me, 2 things. First, when he announced his candidacy, June 2015, he said that Mexican immigrants were criminals, drug traffickers, and rapists. I am a Mexican immigrant. I knew that he was lying. It was fake news, what he was saying. However, people were telling me, oh, no, you're Latinos, you're too sensitive. It's just Donald Trump being Donald Trump. After that, I requested an interview with him. He published my letter with my cell phone number on it on Instagram. I had to change my cell phone number. And then I plan on confronting him at a press conference in Iowa. And in Iowa, what happened is that I waited for a pause. I raised my hand and I asked a question, and he didn't want to answer my question. Not only that, he called a bodyguard and ejected me from a press conference. I was not aware that in the United States you could do that to a journalist. And just by comparison, the only other person who prevented me from asking a question with a bodyguard was Fidel Castro. So here you have Castro and Trump doing the same thing.
Well, then that leads to my next question, which is, what are some of the similarities? Some say that Donald Trump, he's very impulsive, he's not very smart, but anybody who studies history may see some similarities between, dictators and despots. What other similarities do you see?
Well, what I do see is that he hates to be questioned. He always wants to be in control. He wants to have the last word. He interrupts you constantly. The great thing is that we're in the United States. And then we have the Supreme Court that works. And we have a Congress that works. And we have media that works. And so therefore, it doesn't matter what he wants or what he might pretend. The fact is that there's always the possibility of questioning him and challenging him. If this were happening in another country, it would be completely different. I saw what happened in Cuba. I saw what happened in Venezuela. I saw what happened in Mexico, not with a dictatorship, but with a party controlling everything. So that's what I saw. And I think it is our responsibility to challenge him, to question those who are in power. And if he lies 5 times a day, we have to challenge him 5 times a day.
Do you think that the public is getting tired, or maybe he's getting away with more because there is so much distraction, there is so much to report on?
Probably, but I think I prepared myself all my life for this moment. And as a journalist, I think that when it comes to racism, discrimination, corruption, public lies, dictatorship, violation of human rights, you have to take a stand. As I know this is debatable in journalism circles, but as a journalist, you have to take a stand. I think you have to put neutrality to the side when you're confronted with this. I don't know if Donald Trump is a racist. I don't know. I don't know what's in his heart. But I do know what's coming out of his mouth. And it was racist to see that Mexican immigrants were rapists. It was racist to say that people from Haiti and certain African countries come from S-hole countries. It was racist to say that a judge, Gonzalo Curiel, couldn't do his job simply because of his Mexican heritage. Those are racist remarks coming from the President of the United States. And as a journalist, I think you have to confront it, even though it might get tired every single day, but I think that's our responsibility.
Have you received pushback from fellow journalists and editors?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for instance, when I was ejected from the press conference, there were about 50, 60 journalists in that press room, and only two, Ton Llamas from ABC and Casey Horn from MSNBC, only two journalists stood up and told Donald Trump that he couldn't do that. So that was the first time. And other journalists, and I think it's a legitimate question, but other journalists asked me if I'm an activist or I'm a journalist. My answer is very simple. I am a journalist who asks questions, but I think that other than reporting reality as it is, our most important social responsibility is to question those who are in power. The best examples of great journalism that we have in the United States, Edward Murrow against Senator McCarthy, Walter Cronkite during the Vietnam War, Watergate, or the Boston Globe against the Catholic Church because of the sexual abuse cases. All these examples happened when journalists take a stand and leave neutrality to the side.
How is the audience at Univision responding? Is there a different response than, say, the English-speaking audience, the English as a first language speaking audience?
I think it's a great question. Yes, it's very different. Right, right from the beginning, we knew that something was wrong. When you have a candidate who tells you in your face that you are a rapist, and we know that's an absolute lie. I've seen all the studies, and immigrants are less likely to be criminals than U.S. citizens. And immigrants don't come to this country to kill anyone. They don't want to get in trouble with the police. They come here just to have a better life for them and for their families. When you know that, you know something is wrong. And we knew something was wrong when he was saying that the first day. And again, nobody paid attention to us. Again, they thought that we were too sensitive, that we didn't understand what was happening, that it was just Donald Trump being Donald Trump. And we were right. Unfortunately, we were right. And the attacks on the freedom of the press that I personally suffered, it was just an example of what was to come. So, yes, I think the Latino community reacted differently because when somebody hates you, and I think hate is contagious, but when somebody hates you, you feel it in all your body, and you know what's coming, because it happens to us constantly.
What year did you move to the United States?
I came here in 1983. I was a reporter in Mexico City, and I got censored because I wanted to do a report about the president who was choosing, just imagine, he was choosing, we call him dedazo, dedo is a finger. So it's like a big finger telling who was going to be his successor. And then they wanted to call that a democracy. It was not a democracy. And my boss told me, no, you cannot say that. And I refused to rewrite it. And I quit. And I came to the United States, 1983.
So Ronald Reagan was president at that time. And some people say that, Donald Trump's rhetoric is extreme, but his policies are, in some cases, a continuation of what Ronald Reagan was pushing for with a friendly face and a lot of charisma as an actor, right?
Yeah, that comparison is possible. But following the same example, I found it beautiful when I came to the United States, and then I saw my fellow journalists criticizing President Reagan, and nothing happened. They were exactly. I mean, I could go to the supermarket and ride a bike. I didn't have to hire bodyguards, and it was fine. But in Mexico, it was a different story. And even now, Mexico is one of the most dangerous countries in the world for any journalist. Continuing with the comparison with Ronald Reagan, we cannot forget, regardless of the criticism, that Reagan is the president who legalized 3 million undocumented immigrants in 1980 through amnesty, a word that now every Republican hates, but it was a word used by then President Ronald Reagan. So if Trump wants to be Ronald Reagan, this is the way to do it.
So let's talk about DACA.
Yeah.
As a journalist, I mean, you've been covering this for a very long time. Watching his actions when it comes to DACA and the Dreamers, and how the Dreamers, this generation of Dreamers in particular, has been so active. You know, going into Congress, storming Congress, staging sit-ins, getting arrested, family members being deported. I mean, it is extraordinary the type of organizing and courage attached to that, knowing what's on the line if they are arrested. Have you ever seen anything like that?
No, and it's so beautiful. As a matter of fact, I dedicate my book to the Dreamers. They are really my heroes. And what I did at that press conference with Donald Trump, what I was thinking is, what would a Dreamer do in front of Donald Trump? And it's interesting because their parents, the parents of the Dreamers, for many decades, they were invisible and they were silent, because that was the only way to survive back then. Ronald Reagan and other presidents. Back then, it was very difficult to be undocumented immigrant. And then the Dreamers grew up, and when they were teenagers, they started asking questions to their parents. How come you didn't fight as we are doing? How come you stay silent? The wise answer is beautiful, because they said, well, we did what we needed to do, which was to be invisible and to be silent. But the Dreamers decided to change that strategy, and they're doing something completely different, bold, rebellious, in your face. They humiliate you publicly. They force you to change your mind. Look what they did. They changed the mind of President Barack Obama, who for many years said that he was not an emperor or a king, and who used to say that he couldn't give them, that he didn't have the presidential authority to give them the DREAM Act or DACA. Well, they changed that about a month ago, a little more. They were able to put a stop to all the activity in the U.S. government because of that issue. So I think when it comes to leadership, the Dreamers and the survivors of the Parkland shooting in Florida are showing us the kids. They hate to be called kids, they told me, but these young, yes, they do, yeah. But these groups of young people, the survivors and the Dreamers, are showing us what we should do when it comes to gun control and to immigration.
Where do you think this will lead over the next, few years, this activism?
It's very simple. At the end, the Dreamers will win and Donald Trump will lose. What we are seeing is an incredible demographic revolution. In 2044, everyone's going to be a minority. It's going to be a minority-majority country. And despite the fact that Donald Trump has a nostalgic view of the United States, and I think he's promoting official racism from the White House, despite of that, at the end, he will lose. The idea that will prevail is a tolerant, diverse America in which everyone is going to be a minority. If you want to see the future, go to California. The future is happening already over there. It's a minority-majority state. And if DACA students cannot get what they want, and let's not forget that Trump is the president who killed DACA. He is the president who killed DACA. If they cannot get it now, I think they're already planning on something else, on Plan B. And Plan B is 2020. With the next president, things could change. But they cannot expect anything, and I cannot expect anything whatsoever from Donald Trump when it comes to immigration.
Playing a little bit of devil's advocate here, or maybe looking at another side of this, while the millennial generation and the generation afterwards, yet to be named, is going to be majority-minority, is very progressive, right, and very active. There's also this growing demographic of extremism among young people as well, and they find spaces on YouTube, and they're the Alex Jones generation, I guess you could say. Is there a concern that the battle is going to start to heat up, and you're going to see these two sides wage a war against each other, kind of reigniting old arguments?
I hope not, but you're right. I was checking the numbers, and the number of hate groups in the United States has grown in the last 3 years. I think the common element of this, I think it has to do more than with young people. I think it has to do with Donald Trump and the rise of the resentment during the Barack Obama presidency. However, what I'm seeing, I do understand what you're telling me about extreme groups, but I what I'm seeing again from the dreamers and from the survivors, it is an incredible generation. You're part of that generation. You're changing everything. You're not waiting. It's the first generation when it comes to technology that is much superior than ours. I mean, I'm almost 60. I grew up paying my dues, looking up, following the boss, waiting for the authority, waiting for someone just to give me the okay. These generations are not doing that, and I think it's going to be great.
Do you think that reporting is going to change to reflect how active and what's the right word for this generation? How active and just self-starting, they're self-motivated. This generation is.
Yeah, it's already changing. First, the way of reporting is with a selfie. You
That's true.
And but it's really interesting because we were taught, all journalists, veteran journalists, that we shouldn't give our opinion, we shouldn't give our point of view. Mm-hmm. And later we learned that we were wrong, because if you're a reporter, you want the audience to know where you're coming from, who you are, and where you are. The big change that I see, in my generation, everybody wanted to be an anchor. Nowadays, to be an anchor, and I'm an anchor, I am a dinosaur. Because what I'm asking from the audience, what I'm asking from you is impossible. I'm asking you to watch my newscast at 6:30, from 6:30 to 7, to find out what's going on in the world. But if you do it 1 minute before or 1 minute later, I'm not there throughout the day. Mm-hmm. That's to be a dinosaur. I think nowadays, journalists and students of journalism should aim to do anything but to be an anchor, because you have to move. You have to move within platforms. You have to be an amphibian. You have to be a translator to go from one world to the other. Mm-hmm. But don't be an anchor. That's part of the past. I'm convinced that if I wouldn't have a social media presence on Skype and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, I wouldn't have a job now.
My goodness, you're making me feel so much better about my career, because that's literally what I do all day. People say, what are you doing?
This is the future. What you're doing is precisely the future. Let me give you another example. My newscast is seen, like our newscast, by 2 or 3 million people. Mm-hmm. But if we were to do this on Twitter or on Facebook or Instagram, immediately we would have 2 or 3 times that audience. Wow. So I think what you're doing is the right thing. The only problem is that the money is not coming to you.
It's not. No. I can tell you that. I could do both at the same time.
There's not a lot of. I think the big challenge. Talk to all your friends, but the big challenge is how to monetize what you are doing, right. Because you are reaching the audiences. You are where you need to be, but the money is still coming. The majority of the money is still coming. In our case, from the TV side. But at some point, see what the New York Times has done and the Washington Post, mm-hmm. They've been able to balance that and to get almost 50% of their income from the digital side. And that's the future.
So just to bring it full circle, did you get pushback from your company when you had this altercation with Donald Trump?
Quite the contrary. I think they supported me right from the beginning, and it was Univision who, before I had this confrontation with Donald Trump, who decided not to cooperate with him in broadcasting his show. I think it was Miss America back then. So we were not going to cooperate with him, and the company has been fantastic with me, supporting me all the way.
That's great. Jorge Ramos, I feel like we could have gone for another 20 minutes. Author of Stranger, The Challenge of a Latino Immigrant in the Trump Era, a must-read, and hopefully we can have more conversations about journalism. And
absolutely. Anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
If you like the interview that you just watched, I got great news for you. If you become a Young Turks member, you can watch them live as they happen. Only the members get that. You also get Young Turks live. You also get Aggressive Progressive live and Old School live. Everything is available for the members and commercial free. tytnetwork.com/join.